my name's Lee, and today I'm just going to be assembling and then fitting a new shock absorber on a Mark II Toyota Yaris. So this is the actual part that we're going to be replacing, the shock absorber. The one that's come off the car is not in the best condition, so it's time for a replacement. The rest of the components are actually pretty good, so we're salvaging some of those. I've just given some of them a little bit of a lick of paint, but this is a complete unit that's come off the other side of the car, which I've already changed. So you can see this is the damper part inside, and then this is the whole assembly, which I think is technically known as a McPherson strut setup. So we've got the damper, we've got a spring, we've got this kind of rubber boot that protects the moving parts. Then we've got a top mount, which is in various bits. So there's this bit on top, just one nut, and a modified washer that sits the opposite side of the turret in the car. And all of this fits up inside the wheel arch. We can remove this rubber part of the top mount. So that just presses on. And then we've got this set up here. So you can see how much thread we've got there. Now if I were to just put a spanner on that and whiz that off, what's going to happen is as this nut comes off the top here, that whole spring is just going to decompress in a hurry. And obviously all of these parts that are above it are going to go flying, so it could be really dangerous. So what we need is a set of these things called spring compressors, which we actually attach to the spring, wind them up, squeeze the spring, hold it in this kind of position so we can undo all of this assembly. Now I've already done that, but we still need to do the same thing in reverse to fit the new setup. Now let's have a little look at this new damper. Went for a Sachs unit, pretty straightforward. So the first thing we've got to do is kind of commission this by releasing this little setup on top. So it's got the nut on there. We've just got to press this down a little bit, remove this little clip, and let this rod travel. So you can see that's just coming up under its own steam. I'm just holding this fairly gently in the vise, just so it's in a position where I can work on it. Now I just want to compress this and let it travel a couple of times just to kind of commission it. And then I'll just show you here. You can see this kind of recess in the spring plate, which is where we put that spring, and then that part of the spring kind of locates into that little groove there. And as we can see, the spring is way above the threads. Okay, so we can't just squash this down by hand to get the nut on. We've got to use those spring compressors. Okay, so that's one side ready to tighten up. So now we're going to put one on the opposite side. I'm just going to start to wind these up by hand until they're actually biting on the coils of the spring. And then we can just offer this into place, make sure it's sitting about where you want to. And then you could do this various ways. They've got these particular compressors have got a square drive in the end, and then they've got, I think it's a 19mm actual hex on the outside. So all I've got is a conventional power drill here, just with a 1/2 inch driver on it. So I can just a little bit at a time wind each side down. Safety specs is probably a sensible move, just in case. So we've got to squeeze this down until we've got enough clearance to get all of this assembly on the top. Okay, so we've got a decent amount of thread visible across the top there now. So now we can think about assembling the rest of it. So the first thing to actually go on is this rubber boot, and that acts as a little bit of a cushion to the top of the spring into the top mount as well. So it sits around the top of the spring, it's covering up this internal setup. Then we've got the top mount itself. So this is the bump stop. This fits inside there like that. So that's if everything compresses too much, this will come into contact with the top of this part here, and it just stops it bottoming out. So that slips over there like that. And then we've got this anti-friction bearing, so that pushes into the top mount itself. Might actually be easy to do that off of here. So that just taps into there, and this spins around. So that's just taking some of the stress out of the mounting point. And now if I put that on, and I can see it's coming up quite a bit taller than where the nut, where the thread currently is. So I've got to compress that spring a bit more. Okay, so there's enough thread to get the nut on. So the sooner we get this nut on, the safer the whole thing is. Even if it's just on like that, if anything lets go now, that spring can't decompress. So what you'll see on the end of these is that they've got a little hex key. So you put an Allen key in here when you're tightening up this nut to stop the piston inside from spinning round. So we're holding the piston still with the Allen key, tightening the nut down with the spanner. And we want to tighten this all the way down until it bottoms out. So a normal ring spanner now, and just a bit of an extension on this Allen key, so I can really squeeze this up tight. Okay, so that's basically now the spring installed on the damper. So we can start to release these spring compressors. That's loose now. Side just needs a bit more. Okay, so we've got the spring compressors off. We've just got this rubber part of the top mount. You can see in there, it's got that nice shape inside that houses this anti-friction bearing. So that just pushes on. Looks better. Right, so now all that remains to do is go and have a look at putting it on the car. Okay, so this is the car in question. It's a 2007 Mk2 Yaris. So this is the corner that we're going to be working on. So first things we're going to do, let's go and pop just a little chock under the opposite side rear wheel, because we're going to be jacking this side up. So we're going to want to take the hubcap off, and then we'll loosen the wheel nuts off first. Line the jack up. So we can see the state of the existing suspension strut. It's looking a bit sorry for itself. So these are the two main bolts that hold it on to the hub assembly. We've got this one down here which comes up to there. That's your anti-roll bar drop link, and then up inside there it goes through the suspension turret. There's one other little bolt around the back here that we need to undo here. This is a 14mm. This just holds the ABS sensor and the brake line onto the back of the strut itself, onto the back of the shock absorber. I've already loosened off the windscreen wipers. So on these little Yarises, this whole scuttle panel assembly has to come out for quite a lot of jobs, I've realised. So that just comes off of there, and then we can take this panel out, and that gives us a little bit more access for this job. But as you can see, we've still got the metal part of the scuttle panel in place, So this is that rubber cover. So that's got to come off, that's all that is. And then we can see the nut underneath there that we've got to get to. So that's a 17mm nut and the 6mm Allen key we want to hold it. So before I go any further, we've got the car up in the air on the jack, but it's never a good idea to get under a car when it's just on a jack. So we're just going to go in and put an axle stand in as well. So we've got the car well supported now, and we've got our jack back because we're going to need it just to hold the bottom of this assembly up. So when we undo these two bolts and this comes out, the only thing holding this hub back on is the steering. So that's your track rod end there, bolting to the outside of the hub. It's obviously on the bottom wishbone, but then we've got the potential for this drive shaft to actually pull out at the end of the gearbox. If this comes forwards all the way, which it can when it's not attached to this strut, obviously the drive shaft can pull out the gearbox. So something you're going to have to be aware of. We might even just bungee strap it to one of these little holes here, maybe here and here, just bungee the hub assembly back while we're taking the strut itself out. But first job first, we've got to get that nut loose on the top, then we can undo these bolts, this one round the back. The drop link, we only actually have to loosen it off from the bottom here. We can leave it attached to the strut to extract it. Right, so these are the tools that we are going to need. We've got a 17mm ring spanner, which has got a bit of a drop on it. We get the spanner on there, then we go in with the Allen key. So that's to go into the top there. We want to make sure that's well into the top of that strut. So maybe we can just hold the Allen key. Yeah, and actually that wasn't over tight, so that's all good. We're just going to start to loosen this off. We're not going to take it off all the way. Just wanted to make sure that was cracked. So we're going to leave that at that now, and we'll go and work a little bit underneath the wheel arch. Now we know that that's loose. We've got to look at some of these bigger bolts under here. Now you can see there's a little bit of thread exposed here. What I think is always worth doing when you've got any exposed thread and there's a bit of rust present, first of all, I've been in here and sprayed it up with a bit of WD-40, but I did that yesterday, so I had a bit of time to soak in. Now what I'm going to do is just go around here with a little wire brush and just clean up the ends of these threads so that as the nuts come off, they don't bind on any rust and make our life even more difficult. Okay, so I've just got a little rotary wire brush on the end of my drill. Again, make sure you've got your eye protection on here. Also, we've got a flexi brake line here, so you've got to be careful not to rub that with the wire brush. Okay, that's those cleaned up a little bit. These ones are 19mm. We'll just try the impact wrench. Really solid. We've got a couple of options. We can apply a bit of heat. Got to be careful because we've got a rubber boot down here. We've also got this rubber pipe for the brakes here. So I'm going to go with a bit of WD-40 first, see if we get any joy with that. In the meantime, maybe we'll have a bit more luck around the back. The first thing that comes off is the ABS sensor, or the ABS sensor lead. That's on this little bracket, and then the brake hose can come out the way at the back as well, and that might give us a little bit more clearance to get some heat on these bolts if we think we need it, which I think we might. Okay, hopefully you can see now I've got some aluminium covering up that pipe and that rubber boot at the bottom, protected the brake pipe with a sheet of steel. So now we're just going to get some heat directly on this nut. Okay, We don't want to go silly because obviously we're working with suspension components here which can have gas and oil inside them, so if we introduce too much heat we could end up making that go pop on us. We don't want that, so let's see if this is any looser now. Nice, there we go, a bit of heat and an impact gun is what we needed for that. So let's see if we need to do the same to that bottom one, or if all that vibration has just loosened it up a bit. We'll see. Okay, we're in business. That one is moving as well. And now we know that they're just a matter of twisting them off. They're only finger tight. We're moving now, so I'm going to go in with the ratchet and spanner just to speed things up a little bit. Still need the lever bar on though. Okay, that's swinging free now. So if I just come under here, jack that up just a little bit, just so I'm taking the weight of it. Then I'm going to go on top, undo that nut on the top, and then lower this down to let that strut come out. We want to make sure all this is out the way and clearing. See if I can get you right in there. Just spinning that with a finger. We know we've got it supported on the jack underneath, so it's not going to fall down. Okay, so we've got the nut there, we've got the old top mount. Okay, so now that's completely loose up the top, we can drop it down from the bottom. So we know we've got this supported, we can take these nuts off now. Just going to start to let this down a little bit at a time. So now the strut's coming out the top. It's all loose now, so you should be able to wiggle these bolts out. And again, you can see the state that these are in. So these ones I've just cleaned up a little bit. They're exactly the same. That bottom one's coming out. So now technically, that whole suspension strut is loose. So I can just wiggle it out of the hub. It's just a bit tight at the bottom. There we go. Right, so that's loose now. Going to get that brake pipe out of the way and then bring this whole thing out the front there. There we go. So you've released our nice crusty old suspension. And then we can go in with the nice fresh new one. Okay, so we're just going to push that back up into that hole. Same route that we came out. Go around the brake pipe. Get that roughly in place. It's just a question of getting these aligned now. So remembering the nuts are on the front, the bolt came through from the back, so we're going to put it in the same way as it came out. There we go. Right, so that's the first one in. Just pop a nut on there. I'm just going to tap that all the way through. Then just use a screwdriver to help bring that into alignment. Pop that one in. Get the nut on. I'm going to make sure that this is lined up with the centre of the hole, so I'm just going to put my finger in through the top, feeling for that, and then I'm going to push this up using the jack. Might as well make life easy. And I can actually get this to seat. Yeah, that's about there. So we can pop that top plate on, then just start to get this nut on, finger tight again, and we know that everything's basically located where we want it. So now that's on. Okay, so I'm just giving that one more little pump on the jacks to make sure it's right up in its correct place. Then we can start to tighten this down. We want to make sure this is nice and tight. Okay, so we're just going to start to do these up by hand. It's always nice to start things by hand to know that all the threads are lined up properly. If you're getting loads of resistance, potentially could have cross-threaded something. Because we can tighten these up with a socket, these are the only ones that I can potentially do up with a torque wrench. But for now, they're just holding. So I'm happy with that. So now we can put this contraption back together around here. Okay, so it's too tricky to do this holding the camera, but I'm going to try and get it lined up and show you where it all goes from this angle. Now this is the little bolt. I've already got the brake pipe in place, which has got the captive nut on the back. This thing has to hook on the bottom first. There's this little slot in the shock absorber, hooks into a slot there, then it comes up the top and there's another little slot, which once it's hooked on the bottom you can push it down into that. Then you've got to get the hole lined up and then you can put your bolt in. It's a bit of a fiddle, definitely need two hands for it. So then once we've got that in place, we just need our little 14mm socket, wherever that's gone. Okay, so just make sure everything's lining up properly, everything's in its proper place, and then basically all we've got to do is reinstall the drop link. Okay, right, so that's tight. I'm going to get under here now. So we want to make sure these are good and tight. Okay, so that's tight enough for that one. Let's lean on it now. I never like to overstress those ratcheting spanners. Let's lean on it with a normal one. Nice and tight. Get rid of our axle stand. Again, always get your wheel nuts started by hand. Right, let's let it down off the jack. Now I've got the weight of the car on here. I'm just going to double check this. Okay, nice and tight there. Now that cap can go back on, and we can start replacing some of this assembly. Okay, so when I removed this, unplugged the washer jet hose. Okay, so now this just clips in. We can now drop the bonnet down and reinstall the wipers. Just got a last thing to do, just obviously tighten those wheel nuts back up. So we'll reset the torque wrench, give them a click. So there we go, good for a little road test. Okay, so just back from the road test, suspension feels good now, so it's got new struts both sides at the front, and hopefully it's going to work out a nice little car for my son when he starts driving later on in the year. What I didn't think to film, annoyingly, was we had to do quite a lot of work on the back end of this car. So if I just show you under here, the main reason I actually got this car really cheap is because this whole back axle had kind of rotted through and sheared off on one of the welds, so the car was sat down on its haunches undrivable. It broke around here, so I got a second-hand one from a breaker's yard that was in much better condition, refurbished that. Also got a door at the same time because that was all rotten at the bottom and dropped on its hinges, so the front wing had to come off to do that. So she looked a bit sorry for herself for a while. This is the state of that rear suspension that came off. It's pretty rough. Car had been sat for a little while. So got it all refurbished, sorted all the brakes out, rebled them, and took it for its MOT, and it's passed, so job well done. But next project, I'm going to be doing a little bit of work on my Nissan 350Z. So this is a GT4 edition, it's a 2005. I've done quite a bit of work on it already, but I've got all new brakes, all new discs, pads, hoses, so that, and wheel bearings as well. So I'll probably get the camera again when I do that. For now, thanks for watching, and I shall see you again soon.